Yumi, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I discovered my favorite travel hobby this spring break while I was on a solo trip through Italy. So, I'd gotten up early to get to the Colosseum and the Roman Forum and beat the crowds, but soon I realized that there is no such thing as beating the crowds during Semana Santa in Rome. So I'd escaped to a quieter place on the Palatine Hill when I came upon a group of 5 or 6 Japanese tourists. Now, given my penchant for eavesdropping, I listened in. Hey, do you remember how to say, "Can you take our picture" in English? Ooh, no, I forgot. I guess that means we have to get out the selfie stick. No, I do not like selfie sticks, and I don't even really like selfies to start with. So, what a pity it was that they'd have to resort to that in such a beautiful place. Ne, I said in Japanese. Chanto shita shashin torou ka? Should I take a proper photo for you? The looks on their faces were priceless, and I even had to repeat myself before they realized that I was speaking in Japanese. It turned out to be a really great way to meet people, and I used it a couple more times during my trip. Each time I got recommendations for places to go and places to see, places to eat. I even made a couple friends along the way. But there was one thing that I noticed. Each time I was asked, "Are you a hafu?" So the word hafu in Japanese is literally translated from the word half in English. It means that someone is half Japanese and half something else. In my case, I'm half Japanese and half American. By calling someone a mixed race hafu, there's a slight implication that they're somehow less than a person. Now, this isn't conscious or purposefully derogatory, but when you're like me and you're trying to figure out where you belong, it tends to take on a degree of personal importance. It's also consistent with the way that Japan has seen foreigners, not just as foreigners, but as outsiders to Japanese culture. So, Japan has a long history of isolation from the rest of the world, and this is mainly because of its geographic location, but also because of some very conscious political decisions. There was a practice during this period that involved stepping on a tablet called the fumie, which had an image of either Christ or the Holy Family. And those who refused to step on the tablet were then marked as Christians and persecuted as such. Now, this is only one example of a frankly anti-Western sentiment that persisted for a long time. But now, after globalization and the opening of Japan to the rest of the world, anything and everything American, Western, is highly coveted by Japanese, especially by the younger generations. However, we haven't seen a corresponding increase in the proportion of immigrants in the Japanese population. National policies make it very difficult for foreigners to get a permanent residence status, let alone citizenship. Japan also has a linguistic barrier to the outside world. We have 3 alphabets. The first, hiragana, is the phonetic alphabet that it can be used for most Japanese words. The second, kanji, is older and based off of Chinese characters. Each kanji character has its own meaning. Now the third, and the one that I'm going to focus on, is called katakana. Katakana is the alphabet that is used for foreign words. So when foreign words, foreign products, and foreign ideas started to come into Japan, they needed a way to express it in their own language. So they create words in katakana. For example, when the television came to Japan, they made the word television. Now, as you can see, katakana words can sometimes be clunky and just inconvenient to pronounce, so they're often truncated. And you'll more often hear the television referred to as just the televi. Hafu is one of these katakana foreign words. It emphasizes outsider status because it uses katakana, so it places the subject in the frame of, or the viewpoint of Japan, yet removes it from its cultural sphere. Despite a general acceptance, Despite a general acceptance of halfus in Japanese society and the popularity of halfu models in Japanese fashion magazines, even someone like Miss Universe Japan in 2015, who was the first halfu to win the award, faced lots of racial discrimination for not looking Japanese enough. If I think for a little bit too long about the implications of being halfu in Japan, it's clear that's prevented me from being able to assimilate into the culture. I've gone to Japan every single year since I was born for a month and lived with my grandmother. Cumulatively, I've gone 22 times and lived there for nearly 2 years, but I'm always viewed as a foreigner. Japan manifests in my mannerisms. I bow in apology and in thanks. And even my name encompasses both of my cultures. Written in Japanese, it uses katakana and kanji. Foreign and Japanese, all wrapped up into one. Now, my outsider status in the States wasn't as obvious, but it was certainly there. I guess it didn't matter that my last name was clearly Western. People assumed that I had 2 Asian parents. It didn't matter that I had an American passport. I have an Asian one too. But it didn't matter that I had an American passport, or that I loved going to the Geauga County Fair every summer for the funnel cakes, or that I have a completely irrational devotion to Cleveland's perpetually unlucky sports teams. I was never going to be seen as American. People would take one look at my appearance or try to pronounce my first name and assume that I was Chinese or whatever other Asian denomination was common where they were from. That was when I realized that while people identify me for how I'm different from them, they classify me according to what differences they're already familiar with. So race was something that preoccupied me growing up. Like any angsty middle schooler, I was trying to find my identity, and I did not want to be just another Asian nerd. I played violin, I had glasses, I had braces, I fit the stereotype perfectly. But I'd be damned if I admitted it. I grew up with kids named Jiejing, Gitanjali, and Jaewon. It was always an adventure when the substitute teacher had to do roll call. My Asian friends acknowledged my half-Americanness, but to everyone else, I was just one of the Asians. And in 7th grade, when most of my friends started learning Spanish or French, I chose to take Chinese. And people would ask me, oh, so you're taking it for the easy A, right? Because you already speak Chinese. And clarifying that I spoke Japanese, not Chinese, often led to the comment that, oh, well, they're pretty much the same thing anyway. My mom is Japanese, my dad is American. They met in Japan, got married there, moved back to the States, and eventually had me. I grew up being told about how I was different from everyone else, but never from them. To my parents, the ratio of my Japaneseness to my Americanness was completely irrelevant, because I was both, and any further discussion to that point was unnecessary because there was no choice that I needed to make. It took me a long time to have the same view as they did, and for other people, they didn't see things the same way as my parents did. In the US, I am told very often that, oh, you look so much like your mom. Whereas in Japan, people say that I look more like my dad. I realize that in both instances, I am being associated with the parent that is the outsider. Because in the US, my non-Caucasian characteristics are from my mom, I'm more closely associated with her, whereas in Japan, my non-Japanese characteristics are associated with my dad. Always being viewed as an outsider meant that I was also treated according to different standards from someone who was a citizen. in Japanese public school, which I went to through 9th grade, I was somewhat deified as the American. And to be fair, I was the only American. I had a constant supply of people to talk to. I had very lax policies regarding the school dress code. I enjoyed feeling like a celebrity. I was special. Yet it also meant that people would stare and point at me as if I was some sort of zoo exhibit or curiosity. In the States, I was also used to feeling like an outsider. Yet there is no glorification in being Asian in the US. We need boxes. We use our differences to identify ourselves, yet we need boxes and categories to be able to figure people out. What happens when we have more than one box that we fit into? I mean, I'm speaking personally about my experiences as a biracial person, but the same idea applies to other ways that we choose to identify ourselves, such as our skills or our passions. I mean, why else do we have the trope of the nerdy or musically talented jock? Race is a very challenging topic because while we can choose our passions, we are born with our race. And as long as I viewed my race as something that limited me, I couldn't find where I belonged. There were 2 boxes, and I thought I had to choose only one. I couldn't understand why, if America was so diverse, I couldn't just be American, not Asian-American. Then one day I realized that I used the same word to describe both my going to Japan and my return to the US. The word is kaeru. Kaeru in Japanese means to go home. And no matter where I was going, whether to the US or to Japan, I was going home. So in that moment, I decided that I was going to be both Japanese and American. There were 2 boxes, and I chose both of them. Going to university at NYU Abu Dhabi and then now coming to Madrid for a semester has meant that I've added more boxes to my identity. Having never lived in a culture outside of my own, I've never identified with that idea of the third culture kid. But now I'm starting to think that maybe I'm a third culture adult. It was only when I went to college that I realized that not everybody cooks their bacon with chopsticks. When I'm in Madrid, I miss the sound of the call to prayer and za'atar and overly sweet Moroccan mint tea, the smell of shisha and shawarma on the streets of downtown Abu Dhabi. When I was in Italy for spring break, I even missed the relative comfort of being able to speak Spanish, however haltingly. My very elementary level of Spanish had gotten me so much farther in Spain than I had ever really realized. And suddenly being in a situation where I didn't know the language and there were no orientation sessions to help me out took me straight back to that helpless feeling that I had on the first day here. Living in Madrid has been incredible and really interesting because for the first time, I am an actual outsider in the culture that I'm living in. I've gotten used to being surrounded by people who don't speak either of the languages that I'm fluent in. And the first day that I moved into my Spanish homestay, the only words that I knew to introduce myself were, "Hola, me llamo Yumi," and I'm pretty sure I messed that up too. I didn't know how to say that I was going out with friends or that I liked my host mom's cooking, really anything at all. And I thought to myself, this is not where I belong. But why shouldn't it be? The risk to having so many places that we could call home is that you lose any sense of a home. Yet it also means that the world can become your home. I've had so many experiences in so many different places, and I'm very lucky for that. But Madrid has been one of the most profound because it's here where I learned that sometimes it's a good thing to not fit in, to feel like an outsider, rather than to be comfortable. I've helped several Japanese tourists since that first day in Rome, and each time I get the same response. the same initial surprise reaction to my very regional Japanese dialect. But for me, I like to think that I'm helping them find some comfort in a shared language in a place where they don't or may not feel comfortable. And the fact that that comfort can come from someone like me, someone who doesn't look like your typical Japanese person, I hope it makes them question certain assumptions about what they may have, what it means to be Japanese and from somewhere else. I've had to grapple with my own identity, and it's led to me being more open to the differences that I see in other people. And if there's anything that learning my fourth language has taught me, it's that our words have the power to embrace or to push away people, and it's all in how we use them. Now, when I talk about Cleveland, Japan, Abu Dhabi, or Madrid, I can say that I have 4 places to which I can kite. Thank you.